I'm standing here beside this wonderful work by Robin White, a diptych from 1970 showing the Paremata Hills. My name's Linda Tyler and I'm the convener of Museums and Cultural Heritage at the University of Auckland. So this is a very classic work by Robin White from the period when she had just left university, done her Diploma of Fine Arts and been at training college for a year. Her first job was down at Mana College in Aotearoa, where she taught art, and she also got the opportunity to develop her skills as a screen printer. As she was somebody that was very interested in making her work available to the biggest group possible, screen printing appealed to her because it meant that she could make images relatively inexpensively, and in that way make sorts of images that she loved to do available to a large group of the population. This is a really interesting and rather complex view of the Paremata Hills just across the Aotearoa harbour from where she was living in Paremata Nui. So the area that she lived in was called Bottle Creek, probably because of the amount of alcohol that she and her friends, such as Sam Hunt, were consuming while they lived there at the time. But what we can see is this beautiful flat expanse of pale green, eau de Nil green in the foreground, which is the very colour that you get on an overcast day in the Aotearoa harbour. And then she's introduced all of this complexity of line, all of these arabesques to really show the contours of the hills and how they've been worked. As you can see, there are areas of scrub that are growing back again, but for the large part the land has been cleared for farming, and so she's gone to town really, showing us all of the pattern and the energy in the landscape that remains. And in this, I think that she's somebody who's been inspired a little by Rita Angus. She certainly knew of Rita Angus's work, and Angus died in 1970, the year that this painting was made. And many of you will know the self-portrait of Rita Angus's from 1937 that's in the Dunedin Public Art Gallery, where she's folding her arms very, very confidently, and the folds of her coat, her camel coat, look a little like the folds of the hills here. So she makes this wonderful relationship between her own image as a self-portrait and the landscape. With this work, of course, it's a diptych in two halves. So she's considered these two parts of the landscape and then abutted them to make a larger piece, which gives a sense of the expansiveness of the landscape and the hills behind. And in that way, she's done something very clever because she incorporates that aspect of painting whereby things continue beyond the frame. So it's a little bit like the accidental framing that we might find when we take a photograph out into the landscape. So she's suggesting that this goes on, and indeed it does, right around the harbour. The hills encircle that area around Paremata. Whereas we might not think of this as a particularly spectacular piece of landscape, she's finding beauty in it, not only in the fact that it's got this kind of overlay of colonial history where it's been worked, but it's also something which is regenerating and got its own form of life as the bush grows back. Robin White, of course, is very close to the artist Don Binney at this time. He was a realist painter. Like her, they were celebrating what was unique and distinctive about the New Zealand landscape. For him, it was always the birds, having native birds in his landscapes. But for her, she was interested in what was the quintessential aspects of each particular region. Paremata and Aotearoa as areas were new to her, as somebody that had grown up in the north of the North Island. So here she's really trying to learn the landscape and kind of reduce it to a sort of mnemonic in a way, with all of these very abstract patterns being created out of the contours and the lines of the hills. But it comes from that same period that those really wonderful classic works like Sam Hunt at Bottle Creek, which is in the University of Auckland collection, and also the wonderful depiction of Jerry at the Piecock pub, which is very much of this period too. So a very classic piece from 1970 by Robin White. This work is on view at Webb's right up until the live auction, which is on Monday, the 25th of November at 6:30 p.m.